I believe we are live on YouTube. Okay, cool. Um, so before we get started, I'm not sure how many of you saw my tweet on Twitter that was like, "Oh, devs on Flow are setting up collections wrong," and I wanted to do a workshop to sort of, teach people about how to not, set up collections wrong anymore. Well, what I realized after I posted that tweet was that today's content during this workshop is actually going to cover all of that. So I guess I should have coordinated the two to be on the same day and just told everyone to come here. Um, but anyways, I'm gonna end up having a workshop that covers that tweet, probably sometime later this week or early next week, and it's gonna be literally this content. So I guess you're here early. Um, Morgan felt personally targeted by that tweet. Yeah, the reason I posted that was honestly because of what happened during the Matrix market thing, and I looked at their code and they're still linking things. It's not dangerous anymore, but it's not good. So I was sort of annoyed by that, and I guess like I've seen a lot of devs, including people at Dapper, set up collections wrong. So I just want to make a little workshop to bring all the devs together, and see if we can, stop having people link it wrong. But anyways, so last time we were here, we were I think we were on chapter 1, day 3, and we were talking about how people actually are setting up capabilities in the wrong way. So one of the things we were looking at was an example NFT contract, right? And I was showing you that, the proper way to set up a collection, or really any resource, is to include the base type and then put, your brackets and then put all of the resource interfaces that should be linked, not just one or two, but all of them. And the reason we discussed this was because we were saying, oh, well, sometimes people will only link their specific collection public and say, oh, well, this is fine because, this, resource interface includes the deposit and get IDs functions. Therefore, we don't need non-fungible token, collection public or receiver. And that, is true. However, it's not good to do that because, you know, applications or third-party dApps like EmeraldBot that rely on generic resource interfaces to read into your collections won't be able to do so if it's not linked. So you should always link every resource interface, even if you don't think you need to. And I think, again, I was like saying, if you want to read up a little bit more on that, you can always do that here. But a bigger mistake that I actually see all the time, and this one actually is sort of getting into things that are actually dangerous, is when you link any resource. And what that means is when you see a link like this, right, where you get rid of the base type, what's actually going on behind the scenes here is, this is really any resource. So they're actually the same exact thing. Now, the reason this is, I'm going to cover two things. One, why it's bad, and one, why it's dangerous. The reason why it's bad is just because a lot of the times, if we were to link this, let's say we were to link this on account 2, or let's just say account 5, let's send it. And then let's go to the read here. The reason why it's inconvenient is because a lot of the times when people are trying to read from your collection, they're going to always specify the base type, right? They're going to say, okay, I'm going to pass in a user, and we're going to target this public path because we know that it's supposed to be set up at this path. And then we're going to say, okay, we're going to borrow the example NFT collection that has this resource interface linked, right? So let's try and do that with account 5. It's going to break, right? I didn't put anything in the panic statement, but it's going to break. And the reason for that is because this wasn't linked by the user. So inconveniently, we have to basically say, okay, let's get rid of that and try and read the any resource. And this should work if we go and run this, right? It'll return an empty array because there's no NFTs in this collection, but this will work. And while this is fine, it's not really it's not convenient because a lot of times we're going to try and link it like this, right? Now, the reason why it's actually dangerous is because sometimes when we're calling in, or when we're running scripts on our, in our dApp, and we're going to display information on a website, right? Like, let's say we want to have a website where a user connects to it, we run a script, and then we display how many NFTs they have on the website. Well, one problem here is that if we link a collection like this, right, with any resource or blank, right, they're the same exact thing, what can happen is it forces us again to read the collection. Huh? Oh, what just happened? Okay, we're back. Are we back? Okay, we're back. I think I pressed a weird button. But it forces us to read the collection like this, right? And what this means is this is any resource that implements non-fungible token.collection public. So this isn't ensuring that this is actually an example NFT collection. So what this means is we could deploy another contract, right, to this account called Jacob Coin, and we could have a resource, right? Let's just do that together. We could make another contract called Jacob NFT that is, let's just say, I'm not going to actually do this right now, but let's say there's a whole, NFT contract, and we have another resource called like NFT, and there's an NFT here, and then there's also a collection that implements non-fungible token dot collection public, right? And the user linked it and all that fun stuff, right? The problem is that a user could unlink their example NFT collection from this public path and instead link their Jacob NFT that also has a collection that implements this to the same public path. And then when we go to read it, because it's not ensuring that this isn't an actual example NFT collection, it's going to still work, right? Because that resource implements non-fungible token dot collection public, and it's going to return IDs for that other collection. And now, we're not ensuring that it's our NFTs. So that's a bad thing. Um, and that's why I think any resource can sometimes be dangerous because it can fully allow users to link things that aren't actually, what NFT you want to that collection. So I'll give you an example. Let's go to the Top Shot repo, and they actually make this mistake themselves. If we go to the transactions and go to user and go to set up account, remember we were actually kind of laughing at this because I think am I back? Okay. We were actually kind of laughing at this for a second because we talked about two mistakes: one, using any resource, and two, not linking all the resource interfaces. And weirdly enough, TopShot actually makes both mistakes. They don't link the TopShot NFT collection base type, and they also don't link non-fungible token.receiver. So both mistakes are made, and it's pretty bad. And this actually ended up being a relatively annoying problem with EmeraldBot because when I was trying to verify users' Top Shot collections, I couldn't verify that the collections I was reading were actually Top Shot NFTs, right? So again, a major problem is that with EmeraldBot, a user could link a spam NFT token to the same public path right here. They can link the same or different collection to the same path, and it would still work because I would have to read it as an any resource, and I couldn't confirm it was a Top Shot collection, and they would still get the role with EmeraldBot even then, right? So very, very bad. Um, so that's all I had for this lesson. And again, you can continue reading on why this is not good. But the main point of this chapter was, if you as long as you link the base type, which is example NFT dot collection, and you're linking all possible public interfaces, then you're doing a good job, right? So these are just two rules to follow, and as long as you're getting that out of this lesson, that's all that really matters. But again, you can dive more into this chapter if you want to see why stuff is bad and all that. Um, yeah. So the next part of this lesson is day 4, in which we're going to talk about how do you, given a poor link to something like this, how can you actually confirm that it is a example NFT collection, but just in like a weird, wonky way. So that's sort of the next lesson here. So does anyone have any questions on linking things properly inside of a transaction? Oh, and one more thing that I actually probably should have included. Sometimes I also see this, which is very rare and also kind of bizarre, but I also see this where people will link a non-fungible token dot collection type. To be honest with you, I don't really know why people do this. Um, but I wouldn't do this either because all this does is it just doesn't allow you like it does specify that it has to be an actual NFT standard collection, but it doesn't specify that it has to be your specific type. So this is also quite bizarre when I see this. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because if we actually go to the developer forum here, BZ asked a question. He said, oh, I think it was here. BZ said, "Is this transaction safe?" And this is, for context, this is a matrix market transaction. And if you guys remember, matrix market had like a very severe bug in their code a couple months ago. And now they've produced another transaction that, in my opinion, is also really bad. If we take a look at their transaction, look what they're doing. Let's actually paste this into a thing here. So look what they're doing. For some weird reason, they're linking a fungible token.vault type to the normal flow token receiver path. So instead of linking a flow token.vault, they're linking a fungible token.vault, which is, again, not good for your account, because anytime that I try to read a flow token type from your account, it's going to give me a fungible token instead, which is, that's not good. It's not dangerous, but it's just not convenient. It's just not convenient at all. So interesting stuff there as well.
But Jason, do they have to unlink the current one first, or
What do you say, BC?
do they have to like unlink the current capability that's stored in that path, or are they
Yes.
able to just override like that?
No, so in order to actually overwrite, you do have to unlink first, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but I'm almost positive you do have to unlink first. So technically, if you
Okay,
already,
so
yeah. So what I think this is doing is, I think this is attempting to fix their previous mistake, because they were, unlinking and relinking a dangerous path. But this, I mean, this won't do anything if it's already linked. So, but it's still bizarre that they're doing this. Because you shouldn't really ever link the standard type like that. And they're also making a mistake here, by the way, also. Now that we're on this lesson, can anyone tell me what the mistake is on this line? I want to see if I can get a lot of answers here. Make sure people are following. What's the problem on this line? I think there's actually multiple problems. I see a couple of correct answers in the chat. Yeah, exactly. This line, because flow token receiver is always linked on a flow account, on a account on flow, I don't think this will ever run, which is also very bizarre. But either way, if they thought it was, this is still a mistake. It should be this.
It means that they think that they're fixing a problem, but it's a no-op. That nothing happens when it doesn't crash, it doesn't throw an event at all. Nothing happens.
Yeah,
It's just a waste of gas. Doesn't make sense.
exactly. It's bizarre. But I see it could.
While you're waiting, Jacob, I have a question for you
Oh yeah.
about this. How should a platform that's general purpose set the collections up properly if everything's kind of splintered? That's kind of one of the big reasons that you'll see things linked with any resource. It's kind of this bootstrapping problem, right? Where like Floaty or Find or Blockto or whoever else don't necessarily know the type that they're linking. So what's your take on solving that problem? Because we've talked about it before a long time ago, but it's been a while.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I have to think back to that. I don't honestly remember the whole context of that, so I have to read up on that a little bit, or like see the use case for that. But I think one of the reasons that you're saying is that they don't know, like they don't have this import here to be able to write this, I
Yep,
think.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, although honestly, I have to remember, why don't you have why don't you have the import in that case?
Well, look, I can give an example of like, let's say that you're renting an NFT on Floaty.
Yeah.
The renting transaction actually doesn't need to import anything. You can resolve the collection data metadata view from the NFT that you're renting, which would mean that you don't have to import it if you don't want to. You can just call the create empty collection function, set it up, save it where it's supposed to go, and link just the standard views and nothing else. But if you have to link the actual collection type, you have to import it, and that gets a lot more complicated with multi-collections coming pretty soon too. So
Right.
we have a bit of like a bootstrapping problem there.
Yeah, definitely. I think honestly, I think I've run into that problem myself, and that's probably why we talked about it so long ago. I think my take there would be that you should still import these collections, and what you should do is just like auto-generate or generate transactions beforehand. So you would resolve those contract addresses and names before, and
Yep.
then run a transaction that has those imports in there. The only reason I say that is because I just think it's worth it to have the base type there. But actually, for the rest of this workshop, we're going to go over why you don't really like have to have this here, and how we're going to use resource identifiers, which I know you know, Austin, to confirm that this is actually an example NFT type. Um, but I think if I were to do that, I would still resolve these beforehand and then generate the transaction with the imports.
And that's interesting, is it gets really tricky with things like Flix and with things like Dapper Wallet as well, where you
Right.
would have to like resubmit a new transaction for every type. Like I agree with you, it is the ideal. It's just really tough with a statically typed language like this with the analyzer that you can't do any of that dynamically.
Yeah.
Anyway, won't take up your time. Just curious.
No, no, no.
What
That's
your
it's a great it's
thoughts
a
are.
great question. It really is a great question. One thing I also that this is sort of not related to what Austin and I were talking about, but one other thing too is that if you do link, like this, I guess a weird side benefit is that you can actually still read it like this with an any resource type. So again, if you link with the base type, you can read it as an any resource. However, if you link it as an any resource, you can't go the opposite way. You can't read it as this.
And you can't cast it either, can you? You need an auth reference to do that.
Right. Yeah.
You can't downcast, I
Exactly.
don't think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So you can't go from here to here. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff. Although honestly, maybe because we're in the intermediate course, I think it would be super interesting to look into the case that Austin's talking about, and also bring into the discussion like Dapper wallet issues and why generating transactions is not always the best option. But I guess we'll save that for another time. Oh yeah, so I think we were talking about the top. Oh wait, where were we? We were talking about the matrix market transaction, right? Um, so yeah, problem. Oh, where was it here? Yeah. So problem number one, right? I think that they should be linking, right? They do have the import here, so no reason not to put flow_socks.collection here. So they should link the base type. And in addition, I'm not 100% sure, but let's see if they're missing any resource interfaces. So I see they have receiver and collection public, which is great, but let's check out the flow_socks collection on mainnet and see if there's anything else that should be linked. So let's scroll down. So I don't see this. So no idea why they're not linking their base type, right? Flow_socks dot this. And it also looks like they're missing metadata views. So do they have that here too? Yeah, right here. So they're also missing metadata views dot resolver collection. So metadata, we can just paste it here. So 3 mistakes here, right? 1 and then 2, 3. So yeah, this is what prompted my tweet. All right. So now that we know, oh yeah, that's true. I forgot about that, Austin. What is it? They have the,
Default implementations now. So
oh yeah,
your non-fungible token definition has the metadata views functions in them. So at least now all the people who haven't been leaking things properly don't have to be bothered to fix it because it's there and makes our lives a lot easier.
oh yeah. Let's actually look at that together. Is that in their Flow NFT?
I'd be surprised if they've updated the non-fungible token like playground definition, but it is checked in.
I think it's coming from
Has
Flow
been for a while.
NFT GitHub repo. Let's check it out.
Yeah.
Um,
It was always here on this one, but like the non-fungible token standard itself
it's
has a
this one,
resolve
right?
view function on it now.
Yes, right here. Yeah. Oh yeah, on the INFT. I remember that now.
Yep.
So does this
So
mean
now you don't have to link
you have
it.
to actually borrow an INFT to access this now?
Any borrow NFT function will have resolve view on it now.
Got it.
Like you don't have to borrow example NFT like in the example NFT implementation. You can borrow the generic non-typed version, and you still have resolved view on it.
So that
Because
means that
before that was the problem.
this is basically
Yeah,
completely
yeah,
useless now,
largely.
right?
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's just legacy code. You can delete it.
That's so weird. Yeah.
But I don't think that you can safely delete it because people link that type and people ask for that type. So you kind of have to keep them both, which is annoying. It's not
Yeah.
great.
That is, yeah, God, the NFT standard is such a mess. Huh. Yeah, that's wild that this is like, I mean, yeah, I guess either way, they would still, yeah, like you're right. A lot of people still do use this, so you do need to have it because some dApps are still like gonna use this code. So, yeah, anyways, yeah, the NFT,
I don't
I hate the NFT standard.
I don't think that gets cleaned up until the V2 standard for NFTs, and then all this just like start fresh. Don't do it the way you did before,
Yeah.
and see how it goes.
Yep. All right. So moving on to day 4, what we're going to talk about now is, if someone did link a collection like this, right? They forgot the base type and have any resource. How can we still confirm that, we're reading the correct type? So let's look at the day 4. This is called working with poor links. So the random example I gave in this case was, let's say you have a function here, right, called give flow if user has 3 NFTs. So really what's going to happen is a user is going to pass in a reference to their collection. And if they have more than 3 NFTs in the collection, we're going to give them some flow. So does anyone see a problem with this? Let's say that I make an example NFT contract and I say, okay, if you have more than 3 of my example NFTs, you can get some flow. What is a problem, or what's the problem you see in this function based on what we just talked about? How can I sort of get around this and hack it a little bit? I do hate the NFT standard. Let's see. Anyone see any issues with this? And by the way, it's totally fine if you get it wrong. Any participation counts for your certificate. Yeah, exactly, Amethyst. So the problem here is that we're not actually specifying example NFT.collection as the base type right here. We're using any resource. And so the issue is that, I could code my own contract and implement this type on it and just mint myself spam NFTs, and I would still be able to get the flow here, right? Because we have no idea that it's that type. So, the answer here is, oh, what's the fix? Well, the simple fix is to just put the actual base type there, right? But we learned during today's lesson that oftentimes that's not possible because people forget to link the base type, right? And so the another fix we can use is something called the resource identifier. Um, a resource identifier, you can actually look at this little diagram I made. I don't know why, but I'm so proud of this simple diagram. But a resource identifier is basically a bunch of things put together um, to specify what type a resource or something is in Cadence. So if we looked at it, a resource identifier takes this shape. It's always A, dot, the contract address of where the type was initially defined without the OX, so no OX, then dot, and then the name of the contract that the type was defined in, and then the name of the actual type. So in this case, collection, because that's the name of the resource, right? So in this case, this resource identifier would come from reading the identifier of a Flovitar collection that was deployed to this account, right? And you can actually see that here, right? If we take a look at this code, this is a script where we import Flovitar from this address. We create a new collection by saying create empty collection, and now we have a Flovitar collection resource. We get the type by saying new collection.get type, and it gives us the type of that. And now from the type of the resource, we can say .identifier, and that gives us the identifier of that resource. So what do people think we can do in this function that originally had the mistake? What can we write in our and you don't have to write the exact code, but just the idea. What can we add to this function to make sure that this is actually an example NFT.collection type? Hey, Ricardo. No worries at all. Welcome. Do you think we can use resource identifiers here to prove that this is actually the correct type? And if so, what little condition could we add in here so that this function doesn't go through unless the user is passing in the correct type? I see a couple people typing. Yeah, exactly, Dottie. So we should verify the user collection type. Now, do you have any ideas how we could do that? Now that we know about resource identifiers? Nice, Raven. That's step one. Great. So Raven's got step one. We have to use a precondition. And what can we put in the precondition? We can put like an equals equals, but what do we want to compare? If statement, no. You got it right with the precondition. What can we check in this function? The instance of the object. Yep. So we can check. We can use its type, right? Remember, a resource identifier gives us the contract address and contract name of where it's coming from. So using a resource identifier, can we confirm that this is actually the type we want? Yes, Ricardo, you can use getType. Exactly. So we can do user collection.getType, and then what can we get from the type? That we learned about right here. What, right? We have the type right here, and then what can we get from the type right after it? Yeah, Ricardo, exactly. So that's what I was looking for. So you can get the type, and then you can get the identifier right after it. And what you can do is you can compare the identifiers, or you can compare the identifier to what you're think you're supposed to be getting. So let me show you an example of this. So let's say that we link uh, this type, right? Let's link account 4, and let's say we link it with the any resource type, right? Okay, so let's run this. All right, we set it up, and let's go to read our collection. Now this is gonna break, right? Because we didn't link the base type. So let's try it with account 4, execute, and it should panic, right? As we thought. Now what we should do is delete this because we know we have to delete this in order to actually read the collection. Let's run this again. And we get an empty array. But how do we know that this empty array is actually coming from, is the correct type? So let's add n. What statement can we add here to check to make sure that if we want to panic, right? What can we add here? I know we talked about it a couple workshops ago. You can add a little statement here to panic if something isn't true. There's actually a couple options, but it starts with an A. Oh, it just popped up. Wait. It just popped up. Assert. Yeah. Assert. So we can use assert to say collection, right? Dot get type. So it'll give us a type. Dot identifier, right? And actually, first of all, why don't we just get rid of all this and let's log it to see what it looks like. Let's see. There it is. A dot the contract address. Although, okay, this is super confusing. The reason this is confusing is because for some reason on the playground, it treats these values as like hexadecimal or something. So this looks like it's coming from a contract 5, but it's actually not. It's coming from contract 1, but it's like converting the values weird. I discovered this a couple weeks ago, but so this is kind of a bad example because it looks like it's coming from here, but it's actually coming from here. So just stick with me. But anyways, the contract address, the contract name, and then the type. So what we can do here is we can add an assert statement that says collection.getType.identifier equals a dot 01 dot example NFT dot collection, and then the message is this is a different NFT, not my example NFT. Now, I don't think this is going to work because, again, the contract's like doing things weird. Yeah, okay. But you sort of get the point, right? It's just that it's converting. I don't know why it's doing that on the playground, but yeah. So even though this didn't work, I think you sort of get the point. Any questions about that?
You can build composite types with identifiers too, if that's worth showing.
Oh, what do you mean by that, Austin?
Yeah, you can actually make a type as a variable. You could say let composite equals composite type, and in parentheses the identifier, and it'll build the result of collection.getType. It'll be the same. So
Oh,
if you like,
do you mean like comparing the types or
yeah, you could compare the types themselves if you want to recreate the composite type instead.
like this one you're saying?
And that works too, yeah, but you can also with the identifier even build the composite type as well, which is pretty cool. That's like let's see, composite type. This.
Oh, let's see. Try it out. Let C equals composite type.
It'll give you an optional back too, so you'd need that fully qualified thing that you were looking for that the playground gave you the wrong bits about. But
Oh, super interesting.
that's something
Yeah.
that we use. Yeah, we use this just to have like an actual type under the hood instead of checking the identifier. But they're all hooked into each other here, you know.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So I guess yeah, what Austin's saying is you could also pass in the identifier like this. Example NFT.collection. And this will give you the type, right? This will give you a type. And then what you can do is say, assert that collection.getType equals C. And it will compare
Yeah,
these two.
and yep, and the C is an optional as well. But other than that, yeah, it's same thing with building like public path, storage path, private paths on the fly. You can do that with types too.
Yep,
Which I find super handy.
that's a great point. And then lastly, yeah, like just from this, we can also see that you can also just compare the types too. If you want to build a type like this, this also works. So you can say if compare that the type of the collection equals the type that we're building, and it's an example NFT.collection resource. However, the slight issue with this one is that if we don't have the import, so let's say for some reason we don't have the import here, then you can't do this, right? Because now we're not able to access this type. So that's why when I'm comparing types, I always just resort to the identifier because it's always accurate and you don't have to import the type that way. Example NFT.collection. I'm actually curious, do I ever have an example? Let's actually look at the float contracts. I'm really curious to know if I use this in float. I think I do, but I'm not entirely sure. A dot. No, I
So
don't.
I can give you a great example to this use case too, if you want me to yammer on. I can
Oh
also
yeah.
stop.
No,
Uh,
no, no. Any
when
example you
you
have is good.
when you have marketplaces that can accept multiple token types, you might only want to have one kind of transaction. You might not want to make one for FUSD, for USDC, for Flow, and for Tether, whatever else. You can pass in the token composite type identifier, build it on the fly, and pass that in as your payment token type. That way you're not like maintaining 4 different transactions, you're actually just maintaining one. And the argument is what builds the type.
Oh yeah, exactly. In fact, I could have. That's exactly what I'm looking at in the float contract, but I thought I did this because what I did with float was you can pay for floats with float token, but I really thought that I abstracted it to be a fungible token, so you could pay with anything. But let me see. Oh yeah, the purchase function. Take a look at the purchase function. Purchase. Where are you? Here. Oh yeah, look, so I was doing it here. So when you pay for a float, you can pass in Dapper Wallet reasons. So with Dapper Wallet, you need to get a transaction approved, right? And if you are using different token types, then you have to get each transaction approved, right? Because it's different imports, different code. But what you can do instead, oh, it's blurry. Let me increase it. Um, what you can do instead is if you pass in a fungible token.vault type, like Austin was saying, you maintain one transaction, but you're really, using different tokens, right? So what I do here is I say, oh, get the prices for different types of tokens, and I use the payments identifier to give me what actual token type this is. So even though I'm passing in a fungible token.vault, what's really interesting is it will still give me the underlying type that is actually existing there. So what I mean by that is even though I have this type, let's say I have like, let thing is this type, thing.getType, that identifier is still going to be the underlying type, which is a dot, let's say it's o1.flowToken.vault instead of fungible token.vault. So that I always found that super interesting too. And I actually use this pattern all the time when I'm passing in like a generic vault or even let's say this was like a non-fungible token dot collection. The identifier will always give you the specific type of one that it is. And I use that to index into like a price array that gives me different prices depending on which token is actually coming through. I hope that gives you some insight into how things are being used on float and a ton of other things as well. Yes, exactly, Austin. So if we go back to that, where was that again? If we go back to that as well, the same thing exists for types as well. So if we look at this token.vault, then thing.getType will equal, a flow token at vault instead of a fundable token at vault. Or if this was actually like FUSD, it'd be FUSD.vault, and so on and so on. Or same if you had like a reference here. Pretty cool. So that was the resource identifier. Did I have any other things I wanted to talk about here? Let's see. Yeah, I think that was it for this lesson. Any questions about anything we covered today? I think that might be all we have for today. And then next time we'll talk about chapter 2. I'll stick around for a couple minutes while people maybe ask questions, but otherwise that's it. Yeah, thanks, Austin, so much for coming. So, Dottie says, so when is the next class? So usually the next class will be on Wednesday, but this week it's going to be on Thursday. So let me actually link you the invite in chat here. Let's go ahead and paste that in chat. Boom. That's the next one. You're welcome, Falcon. Thanks for tuning in. All right, everybody. I'll see you all on Thursday. And with that, enjoy the rest of your week. I'll see you then. Bye, everybody.